Okay, in this video, I want to explain to you where the equation of a circle comes from. So, believe it or not, it actually has to do with the Pythagorean theorem, which we learned about in geometry, and has to do with triangles. So, let's take a point on this circle. We'll choose 1, 2. I'm going to label that for you. 1, 2, and another point, 4, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. Up 6. 4, 6. Okay, so let's turn this into a triangle and use the Pythagorean theorem to find the missing side. This is a right triangle, right? And we remember from geometry, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's the Pythagorean theorem. And that's used to find the missing side of a triangle. In this case, the c is the hypotenuse. So we've got a, b, and we're looking for c on this side. Okay, so the length of this side here is 3. We can see that 1, 2, 3, but we can also see that the x values here are 4 and 1. So this is 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is over 1. So 4 minus 1 is 3. So that's the distance here, because you've gone 4 steps, but you don't count this first one right here. So you actually have a distance of 3. This side is 6 minus 2, which is 4. So the length of this side is 4. The length of this side is 3. And we learned in geometry that there are special triangles called 3, 4, 5. So we know this is 5. I chose this example on purpose. But let's apply the Pythagorean theorem anyway, just to check it. So we have 3 squared plus 4 squared, that's the legs, equals c squared. So we're looking for the hypotenuse. That's 9 plus 16, which is 25. We take the square root of both sides, and so c equals 5. And 5 is the length of the hypotenuse, right? Which we knew already because this is a 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that's the Pythagorean theorem. Now, it turns out that the distance, we're talking about the distance from this point to this point. So the distance from one point to the other is 5. 5 inches, 5 yards, 5 miles, doesn't matter, 5 units. Okay, so we learn in geometry about the distance formula. The distance formula comes from the Pythagorean theorem. It is the Pythagorean theorem. It says the difference in the x's, x2 minus x1, right, which is what I talked about here, 4 minus 1, squared, plus the difference in the y values, which we said was 6 minus 2. This is just in general, squared, equals the third side, which we'll call c squared. Okay, so that's the Pythagorean theorem. That's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But we call it the distance formula. In geometry, we take the square root of both sides, and we say that the distance, because these cancel here, I'm just going to call it d for distance, is the square root of difference in the x's squared plus difference in the y squared. So that's the distance formula, and we learn about that in geometry class, right? But it really is just the Pythagorean theorem. It's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And it gets us the distance from one point to another in a coordinate grid. Okay, so that's a little review of geometry, but what does that have to do with circles? Well, it turns out that this point here, if we consider this to be the center of our circle, and this is a radius going to the edge of the circle, and we say that the radius is 5, let's say, inches. Well, any other point on the edge of my circle will also be 5 inches away, because the radii of a circle are all the same. So if I were to go straight up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'd be at the point 1, 7. And that would be a point sitting on my circle that looks like this. And you can now see that that's a radius, and that's a radius. And if I were to do that this way too, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'd be at the point 6, 2. Is that right? 4, 5, 6. And that also would sit on my circle. So you can see that I'm forming a circle here using radii. 1, 2, 3, and they're all the same length. They're all exactly 5, right? 3, 4, 5. So a circle is nothing more than a bunch of points that are all exactly the same distance away from a given point. We'll call it the center. Okay, it makes sense. That's what a circle is. And there's a point, of course, here, and a point of here, and a point down here. All right, but let's focus on the 3 that we know. We've got 1, 7, 4, 6, and 6, 2. So the distance from here to here is the same as the distance from here to here, and it's the same as the distance from here to here. So what stays the same is this point 1, 2 is constant, right? So it's always some x value, whether it's 6 or 4 or 1, minus this x value plus some y value minus this y value squared. And when I take the square root of that, I get the distance, which in this case is 5. So this is very specific. This is pertaining to this circle right here, but I'm using the distance formula. And I'm saying that the distance from here to here, in which case this would be, x would be 6 if I were to plug it in. I'll do it in another color here. If I were to plug it in, let me slide that. I want you to still be able to see the picture. If I were to plug in 6, 2, for example, 6 minus 1 squared plus 2 minus 2 squared. So for the 6 for the x value, 2 for the y value, I get 5 squared plus 0 squared, which is 25, and I'm taking the square root, which is 5. So it satisfies. It comes out to be 5. The distance between here and here is 5, which we knew already because I made it that way. But every point that satisfies this, that every x and y that comes out to be exactly 5, using the distance formula, will be on that circle. So it's part of the equation of the circle. And the same thing will work if I plug in the 1, 7 or the 4, 6. So to wrap it up, the general form of the equation of a circle is, we'll say, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Okay, so remember, this is just in general here. So what we're saying is h and k represent the center of a circle. H, comma, k. Okay, h is your x value, k is your y value. And that's just a general way of saying the center of a circle. And then, of course, r is the radius. So any equation of a circle is going to be in this form. So the whole point of this video, simply, I could have just given you this equation, said this is the equation that we're going to be using, and it represents a circle, but I wanted to show you where it comes from. I wanted to show you a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and that triangles actually help us to come up with the equation of a circle. So this is what you need to know. This is what you'll be using, and it's really easy to use because as long as you know the radius of a circle and the center of the circle, you just plug them in here and you get the equation of the circle. And of course, this being an algebra class, I could give you the equation and I could say, hey, what's the center or what's the radius? And you kind of work it out through there. So in the next video, I'm going to do examples of the types of questions that you're going to see when you're using this. So this is just an introductory video to show you the equation of a circle.